Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is without a doubt one of the biggest and most beloved games of the year. It sold 3 million copies in its first 3 months and did the first million after only a few days. It has 93% positive reviews on Steam, it runs remarkably well, even on low-end GPUs, and the DLC package pretty much guarantees that people won't shut up about it for years to come, and I'm proudly one of those people. Kingdom Come 2 is, according to me, a counterexample to many modern gaming trends that everybody hates, like overpriced BS, unoptimized slop that doesn't run, like, at all, and the general corporatization of the hobby as a whole. I personally loved it so much that I started a whole YouTube channel thanks to it, and if you listen very carefully, you'll find music from the game in most of my videos. Among other things, I praised its ability to strategically deploy boredom in order to get the player more invested and immersed in the world. It's not a perfect game, but it's so good that it's definitely going to be Game of the Year for me, despite the brutal competition. Oh, and the hardcore mode is absolutely brilliant, even though my Henry is still out there sleepwalking in the Trotsky wilderness somewhere. However, where there is honey, there is flies, and in this case, 12,000 of the least grass-acquainted flies you've ever seen came to drag this masterpiece down. If you've played the game, you might have a general idea as to what might put people off. Perhaps this reviewer found the combat too easy, or that the story was maybe too linear, or maybe they needed some Subway Surfers to be able to focus on the alchemy minigame. Oh yeah. We're about to have a normal one over here. The Woke Content Detector is a Steam curator page that purports to detect games that are woke. How woke they are and why. You might be thinking, but isn't that term made completely obsolete thanks to the worst people you've ever seen using it? Worry not, however, because we speak the language of science over here. We have a methodology, you see, which lays out the exact criteria we use to mathematically determine if something is woke or not. Criteria like LGBT, DEI, climate action? I didn't know that was added to the list. Apparently transhumanism is also a left-wing idea, even though the biggest advocates of AI slop and brain modifications are the people that the average leftists would personally... And some of the items on this list are just contradictory. I mean, how can you be anti-pedophile and pro-Republican at the same time? Basically, what this list is an explosive mix of strawmen and complete bullshit. According to it, leftists are bigoted against white people, heterosexuals, they want to destroy the family, like center-right parties, weirdly enough, and worst of all, hate free speech. And after reading this list, how can you blame them really? After I went through my emergency supply, I finally decided I was brave enough to read the whole review, and oh boy. So the way this thing is structured is that there are two main categories, the LGBT and DEI, and each of them has its own list of evidence to back it up. As I scrolled through it to do some preliminary research, a few things jumped out to me immediately. The first is that whoever made this review just doesn't know that much about the game. For example, the LGBT section makes the point that Hans Capon, Henry's main companion and friend, being distraught at the prospect of his own marriage is somehow suspect. I suppose the point they were getting at here is that Hans doesn't want to be married because he is gay, but if you've actually played the game, you'd know that this is simply not the case. During the Samin wedding, Henry catches Hans trying to court a girl in the attic of a barn, and in Kingdom Come 1, Hans also appears completely straight, so he's definitely not gay. He is, however, bisexual, so the reason why he doesn't want to be wed is not that he doesn't like women, it's because he is being married against his will and is being used as a pawn in his uncle's negotiations. Even the video they use as a reference has this part in it, in fact, but they were so eager to find any manifestation of Hans being gay that they completely ignore what the context of the story was. And since we are on the topic of gay equals bad, I noticed a very strange inclusion in the LGBT section, namely point number 4. It references the part of the game where Godwin is telling Catherine about a fictional story where a woman has sex with a bow. Catherine in response jokes, saying that Godwin was not polishing his Greek reading the story, but instead something else. This is quite a disgusting joke, I have to say, but why is it in the LGBT section? At this point, this isn't even a dog whistle, it's a bullhorn, if you'd pardon the pun. It's affirming the homophobic belief that LGBT people are deranged in many other ways, including having sex with animals, being pedophiles and so on. It's quite unfortunate because the reviewer likes to present himself as a respectable and not bigoted at all, and at first I was planning to bring down this facade by slowly gathering evidence. But this is the beginning of the review and he's already unburied the lead, painted it red and showed it to a bull. Okay, I'll stop. Another example of this review being not that well thought out is entry number 4 of the DAI section. The writers take issue with the fact that the game is using the word anti-Semitism, which was first used in the 18th century. This is presented as a concern regarding the historical accuracy of the game. After all, why is it using terms that didn't even exist in the 15th century? Is it maybe trying to virtue signal to woke liberals who think anti-Semitism is bad? Instead of answering that question, let's instead take a look at some text written in time-appropriate English for the 1400s. I won not whither he is zigun, for no man him seeth that more way. I think we can all see the problem here, right? If the game was written in Middle English, it would sound like gibberish, obviously. And that's why the game uses words that we are familiar with, like anti-Semite. The word right before it, infiltrate, was first used in the 18th century as well, but this list doesn't seem to have a problem with that, nor does it have a problem with the rest of the inventory screens, the quest directions, in-game pop-ups, as well as the voice acting. All of it is full of modern words and sentence structures. It almost seems like the maker of this list didn't really care about time-inappropriate words, but were instead offended by the word anti-Semite itself. And don't worry, we'll get back to this. A good faith interpretation of this mistake is that the writers of the list were so passionate about historical accuracy that they didn't even realize they were advocating for a game to be written in an incomprehensible language. To evaluate this claim, let's take a look at some other examples where the game is criticized for its historical accuracy. A large portion of the points from the DAI section are directed against the fictional character of Musa of Mali, a well-traveled scholar who ended up with the ranks of Sigismund's army. He is black and Muslim, so predictably the writers of the list take issue with the fact that King Sigismund allowed him to join the ranks of his military. They also link a video from Toasty Gaming below to supposedly bolster this argument, but after viewing it I found that only about 10% of it makes a historical argument and the rest is speculation about a sinister conspiracy of leftists who want to make you think that black people had a significant presence in medieval Europe. They are doing this, of course, by having one singular minor black character in a game that in no way claims to be a historical documentary. The main historical argument on this video is that Sigismund and Sultan Bayezid I of the Ottoman Empire, Thunderbolt, now that's a name, were sworn enemies after the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, where Sigismund got defeated and was forced to flee. So, with this beef between the two in mind, it may sound very unlikely that Sigismund would ever accept a quote-unquote goodwill gesture from Bayezid. However though, Sigismund was known to be a pragmatic man, and after getting defeated at Nicopolis, sought indirect truces with Bayezid I through his vassals like Stefan Lazarevich of Serbia, whom he fought at Nicopolis just a few years earlier. So it isn't all that implausible for Sigismund to have accepted a member of Bayezid's court if he had been offered one, even if such acceptance was only a tokenistic gesture. The video makes the argument that Bayezid I hated Sigismund so much that he personally looked for his corpse after the Battle of Nicopolis ended. The implication being, of course, that it's impossible for Bayezid to have sent an envoy like this in the first place. However, this also falls victim to historical short-sightedness. Around the events of Kingdom Come II, Bayezid was under tremendous pressure from the Timurid Empire, which would later go on to defeat and capture him at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. So it's not implausible at all for Bayezid to have sent an envoy to Sigismund, even if it was just a cold strategy of realpolitik. Musa even mentions this during dialogue in one of the videos linked in the review.
I am sure you understand that I did not want to wait for Timur's savages to cut my head off.
Once again, the review seems to ignore its own sources when it's convenient to them. This leads me to my last point, that Bayezid himself had a history of negotiation through gifts, as he did with the Byzantine Empire during the 1390s. No evidence of an envoy like this between Bayezid and Sigismund exists, but the historical circumstances were all there, it has to be said. Now, is it relatively implausible for a black man, specifically from Mali, to have been this envoy? Yes, I think so. But it's also wrong to claim that the envoy is a historical impossibility somehow. And most importantly, Musa is a good enough character that I can suspend my disbelief just to see where his story goes. And after all, this is the beauty of historical fiction, using historical context to make seemingly implausible events work for the sake of making a compelling story. Like, for example, the questline of Miller Crazel, where he is able to reinvent black gunpowder using ancient manuscripts. There is no evidence that anything like this ever happened either, but the review never calls it out. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I think it reveals something interesting about the maker of the review, as well as people like Toasty Gaming. Both of them argue that since these two kings didn't like each other, then there would be no way for any exchange of gifts to happen, while completely ignoring the broader historical context. This is a pitifully superficial way of studying history, and I suspect that they engaged with the game itself on a similar level. For example, the review complains multiple times that Musa is being treated far too well for how a black Muslim would have been treated in Bohemia in the 1400s. This expectation seems to come from the idea that the opinions of the average person back then were more in line with, say, a 20th century KKK member, when in fact it would probably be more like the way Henry reacts. A mix of confusion, curiosity, and concern about some perceived health issues. After all, this is someone who has never seen a black person in their life, and their reaction stems from ignorance instead of hate. If you want to put a name to it, call it innocent racism, in contrast to the malignant racism that would develop later. According to the writer, the good treatment of Musa proves that he is DEI. But how does this hold up to reality? First of all, Musa was meant to be a personal physician to Sigismund due to his extensive education and training, but he is relegated to comparatively mundane work, taking care of wounded soldiers, which is something that he himself finds very humiliating. Secondly, when a noble in the camp is murdered with poisoned wine, Musa immediately becomes the main suspect. A friend of the murdered noble even calls him a foreign dog, but I suppose as long as there is a single person defending him, he must automatically be DEI. And third of all, even after Musa joins Henry's band, helps them rob Sigismund, and almost dies in the process, some members of the band still openly distrust him, citing his different religion. Dry Devil even makes a racial joke, at which point the reviewer calls him an audience stand-in. No, my friend, he is a stand-in for someone, but not for us. All three of these points support the idea that Musa is indeed not just an untouchable tokenistic inclusion towards whom people are being ahistorically nice. He is a downgraded doctor who struggles to fit whichever group he is part of. But since people aren't constantly calling him the N-word, I guess, I suppose he is just DEI. I can only imagine that if the racial tension was more explicit, it would have caused an even bigger fuss. The fact that these hawk-eyed woke detectors miss this lengthy context both within the game and real-life history betrays not only a surface-level engagement with the material they are supposedly there to review, but also a pitifully oversimplified understanding of history in general. Being lazy and not engaging with history too well is one thing. However, I think something more sinister is going on here. To illustrate, I'd like to very rapidly take a look at what the rest of these complaints about Musa are, because so far we've only talked about two. When invited to the captain's tent and offered alcohol and a game of dice, Musa declines, citing his religion as the reason. Number 21 of the DEI section complains about this for some reason. There is no explanation given, and I suppose that's because it should be obvious to the audience that it's bad for a Muslim to mention his religion's teachings. On the other hand, number 23 complains about him being a hypocrite and staring at the girls in the bathhouse after saying that his religion teaches fornication is bad. It also complains about the fact that Henry seems to have no problem with this, so I guess staring at women is bad, but only if done by a black man. You can't fool me, you fucking man-hate. And as for number 24, where Musa jokes with Henry about stealing his crush, the only counter-argument I have is this. The reviewer also complains every time Musa says anything good about his home country. When he says that Mali is safer and treats women better, that's apparently a bad thing, even though it was probably true at the time.
A caravan attacked so close to the city. It really isn't very safe around here.
It's also bad for him to dislike anything Bohemian, if he dislikes the wine or the local food, or even when he rightly calls out the pitiful strength of the apothecary potions around. But every time Musa says anything positive about Bohemia, that is swept under the rug for some reason. On the other hand, it's also apparently bad for him to ever do something substantial for the story. It's bad for him to talk back to anyone, to be at the center of the scene for any amount of time, it's bad for him to save Henry, and it's bad for Henry to call him brave. Once again, a better reviewer would call this character development, because at the beginning Musa admits that he is a coward. And there are also signs that he might be a bit of a fraud, since he hasn't even read through his own books. So him sticking his neck out for Henry is actually a quite significant point in the story. But no, here we don't think about gay shit like character development. What we do instead is lighten things up a bit. Talk about respect for the developers, huh? So to summarize, Musa is being attacked from every possible angle. He is attacked for being rude, he is attacked for being nice, he is attacked for following his religion, as well as for not following it. He is attacked for being the center of the shot for 5 seconds, and we all know that he would be super attacked if he had no role in the story at all. But among all of this, I think the most revealing example is when the review attacks the game because Henry defends Musa from the erroneous accusation of murder. The argument is, why would a white Christian automatically defend a black Muslim, even if the accusation is bogus? And the answer to that, of course, is that the defense is not automatic. Defending Musa is only one of many options, and if you want, you can get Henry to cast doubt on him, despite the fact that, as I said before, Musa had a good alibi. The fact that a nice option even exists apparently warrants a mention on the list. This is quite a bizarre pattern in this review, because it will often criticize the game for having certain options that a reviewer doesn't personally like. Like for example, when Henry has the option to tell Catherine that she is the bravest woman that he has ever met, even though it's objectively true. Another example is if you offer to bring Rosa Ruthard to help you with infiltrating the former Ruthard castle. She pushes back a bit, saying that she would probably be a burden, and Henry in response has the choice to either agree with her or to tell her that she has already proven herself to be brave. The game gets an entry for simply allowing you to be nice to her. And going back to Musa, after he tells you that he hates Sigismund, Henry has the option to either ask him to join his insurgents or tell him that they should split. Once again, the game is accused of the cardinal sin of promoting multiculturalism for giving you the option of inviting Musa to your team. The same goes for all of the gay relationships in the game. You can have a fling with Black Bartosz if you want, or a full-blown relationship with Hans. These are of course both optional, and the game makes it perfectly clear when you're choosing a romantic dialogue by using this very distinct icon next to the relevant box. The subtext here is of course that it's not enough for you to make your Henry straight if you want. Being straight, being racist, being crass towards women is non-negotiable. The writer has already decided that his Henry should be a racist straight man and nobody else should be allowed to choose anything different. In his video about Stellar Blade, Sean puts this phenomenon best when he says that having certain options in RPGs is similar to having to press 1 to choose English on your phone. It doesn't hurt you in any way, but the fact that the option exists in the first place and you are not the only assumed default is somehow counted as a strike against the game. This is doubly bizarre because the review is posted in a forum specifically about RPGs, and none of the responses even seem to care that an RPG is being criticized for allowing you to, roleplay. Once again, the freedom of artistic expression crowd only cares about artistic expression when it fits their own ideas, and the existence of anything else is too much. And since we are on the topic of women, the game is criticized every time a woman teaches a man how to do something, or is more knowledgeable about something, or even when she responds sarcastically to a botched skill check. Like for example, when Rosa Ruthard talks condescendingly to Henry after he failed a scholarship skill check. This occurrence is of course normal in RPGs like this, but every time a woman does it, it is somehow a bad thing. The overarching theme of this review's points on women seems to be that a few of them are Mary Sues that have no business being as good as they are at certain things, and are unnaturally untouchable by the consequence of their actions. For example, it criticizes Catherine for being able to kill a guard, even though they later admit that it was obviously a stealth kill. It also criticizes Rosa for being good with a crossbow, but completely fails to mention that her shenanigans escalate her father's conflict with Mintmaster Vavak. And later on, while helping Henry take back the house, some goons come up to her room and she is visibly scared of them, finally asking Henry to come and save her. But the review once again fails to mention this, as it's too busy criticizing Henry for asking for help in a 7 vs 1 fight. The funniest example perhaps of the whole review is the interaction between Godwin and Anna of Waldstein, the widow of a mine owner. The context behind this exchange is that Godwin is trying to get her to invest some of her vast wealth into the struggle against Sigismund. The game gives the player hints that probably she is the one who amassed the wealth in the first place, as opposed to her husband, and that's where the problems start. First of all, the review claims that Anna is a misandrist, and as evidence provides no examples of misandry on her part. But the funniest sentence is that after they are done calling her names, the review says, though she doesn't survive the upcoming attack. So, a woman having power is not so bad if she dies in the end. I would have really liked to wrap this complete catastrophe of a video up right now, but unfortunately, as hard as it is to believe, it gets even worse. During the course of the game, Henry helps his Jewish adoptive brother Samuel in escorting a few remaining Jews out of Kuttenberg as Sigismund is in the process of doing a pogrom against them. The scene is actually one of the most powerful cutscenes of the game, and handled with great respect by the writers. It's also DEI. You see, apparently the supposed history absolutists don't like it when a game talks about historical events. You can say that this particular point was actually concerned at the fact that there was no Jewish quarters in Kuttenberg. But I can prove that that is not the real problem here, because at some point you can, as Henry, tell Samuel that you didn't know that Jewish people were persecuted throughout history. Apparently it's woke for Samuel to scold Henry for not knowing about the fucking Crusades. Point number 52 is concerned with the fact that Peter of Pisac is educating Samuel on that very rich history, though at this point the real problem is probably that he calls it a sad tradition as opposed to a based tradition or something. One can easily imagine an RPG set in current day Europe that mentions the Holocaust, and by that same exact reasoning that would be called woke too. It doesn't even end there. Depending on how you complete the final quest, Samuel can live or die. If he does die, Henry has the audacity to give his brother in arms a Jewish burial. I guess at this point we should just remove the Jews from the game completely. Will that fulfill your desire for historical accuracy, you dirty, slimy fuck? And out of all of them, the most revealing point of all is number 53, in which he says that it's bad for Samuel to have the audacity to suggest that the money they stole from Sigismund should go to rebuilding the homes that he burned. Again, by this very logic, the Wiedergutmachung, the reparations paid by Germany to Jewish people after World War II, is also woke and DEI. And in case you still think this review cares about historical accuracy, entry number 61 has a problem with Zizka telling Henry that Catherine was a victim of sexual assault in her past. But once again, women getting sexual assaulted during times of war was normal at the time. So why does the reviewer have a problem with the game having such themes? This particular question is an overarching mystery with this entire review, because on the one hand it nitpicks the most absurd details, like the word anti-Semite not being invented in the 1400s, and goes on a whole tirade about how people in Mali didn't actually drink yogurt even though they did. But on the other hand, it scolds the game for making reference to certain darker parts of European history. If after all of this you still have some good faith left, these two positions may seem contradictory to you, but as we have shown before, they don't really care about history. What they wanted, of course, is a game that never criticizes the actions of Europeans, and only paints white Christian men in the best light possible. Every time a woman criticizes a man, helps him, or is better at anything, that is considered a bad thing. Rosa Ruttard's knowledge of the underground tunnels of Kuttenberg doesn't come from her studying her father's maps. It actually comes from DEI. In the place of the word woman in this equation, you can put in any category that doesn't fit into the white Christian man. It can be a white Jewish man, a black man, etc. In the quest of sniffing out unearned position of power of minorities, Furin here is advocating for a game where Christian men are some kind of superhero that can never be mistaken or ignorant or just not strong enough, and when somebody is there to help, it better be someone of the same identity category, because everything else is offensive. Another through line of the criticism levied here is that every time atrocities done by European men against minorities are mentioned, that is considered woke. It's a good job that none of the videos referenced did the quest lines of the nomads, because the review would be twice as long pointing out every time a nomad complains about being persecuted. You almost get the idea that the writers wanted to erase some genocides from history. If only there was a word for that. I'd like to close this disgrace of a video by looking at the kind of people that read this stuff. Steam has very strict rules when it comes to hateful rhetoric, as admitted by Furin himself, but RPG HQ is much laxer. So we would probably expect to see the true face of the average woke game detector enjoyer here. I'm really sorry I must do this, but since you made it this far, you probably like to suffer anyway, and most of the responses are full of the F word as you'd expect. And some of them are talking about how the use of the word they as a singular third person is either a feminist invention or a black dialect. And everybody who disagrees is called the N-word. That's the hard R there.
I dropped my fair share of hard R's back then because we...
The funniest post from the ones that I was brave enough to go into was one that said that Yu-Gi-Oh cards supposedly went from using he, she to using they in 2007. Like, How don't you have anything better to do with your life than fucking scour Yu-Gi-Oh cards for woke language? And to be honest, I could say the same about the writer of the review themselves. And yes, I'm using the word themselves here out of sheer spite. Fuck you! They scoured through 60 hours of somebody else's gameplay to find evidence for this masterpiece of a review. In that time, they could have just played the game themselves, learned something about it, and made an actual critique. I guess that's because they didn't want to give Warhorse any money, or were just lazy, but what does this reveal about the reviewer? Because even the most devastating reviews that brutally trash a product that someone put real effort in, at the very least, still have the decency to actually play the game. This, alongside many elementary mistakes and lies by omission, told me that this review was never approached with good faith. If it were, like Furin pretends it was, then the reviewer would have at least thought for 5 seconds that criticizing a 2025 game for using modern English is really fucking dumb perhaps. No, I will never let this go. And if this person is not just a bigoted little goblin, then why did he include a zoophilia joke in the LGBT section? So not only was this review not approached in good faith, but it was written to be dropped in an echo chamber, where all the echoes are slurs. If you sort the games that the woke content detector has reviewed by top selling, you'll see a whole avalanche of either not recommended or somewhat not recommended games. That is, for the games that are woke but not too much. Fucking No Man's Sky is not recommended because alien races don't conform to human sexual dimorphism. And I regret to inform you, but Bloons TD6 has also fallen. Black Ops 3, a game where soldiers use exoskeletons to become superhumans? Woke. Because no amount of sci-fi power armor can ever make a woman worthy of combat. Come on guys. Not even Metro fucking Exodus gets a pass. And if your criteria are such that they make you say that Metro Exodus is bad, then you are truly beyond saving. If you ever want to find a game that is recommended, you have to scroll through a whole ocean of ones that aren't. Imagine living like this. Imagine seeing almost every game as part of a sinister conspiracy to destroy everything you hold dear, and all you can do as a response is to write on unmoderated websites to appeal to some of the most... I wanted to close with some witty remark, but this is just sad. Everything wrong with this person could have just been solved by having a hobby, but they have cursed themselves to spewing bile on the internet. And as much as I hate to say this, nobody deserves to live like that. I don't think I'll ever make another video like this, for my own sake first and foremost, but also because all I got from making this is just pain. I feel like I've gone to some dark corner of my city and filmed the homeless people there for entertainment. People who in another world would have turned out better than this. If my channel was big enough to make money from this video, I would probably just never upload it. But since I made it this far, I might as well go ahead. Thanks for watching, I guess, and good night.